We're born in innocence, and that's our nature. And we will make mistakes. And guess what? That's how we get to learn and grow. Some of those mistakes will be much bigger than others, but so too are the lessons.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Channel Within. I'm Mira, and today I have with me Josie Thomson, and we will be talking about her NDEs and, more importantly, what happened to her, how this was integrated into her life afterwards. Welcome, Josie, and thank you for being here with me today.
Hi, Mira. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so where do you want to get started?
Well, we were talking before about NDEs and how people often think, oh, wow, what a gift, to have had an NDE and survived. And, I often get that kind of question posed to me about, how was it a gift? But I think we need to look at the whole picture when it comes to an NDE. It's not something that you choose to have, it kind of happens. And when it happens, it shocks you into a new layer of awareness. You can't deny the experience, you can't deny what you saw, and what that whole whatever it was for you that you saw or experienced in your NDE. It's quite different for most people. There are some common themes that people have when they have NDEs, but there's also a very unique experience, I believe, that's also revealed for the person that's having the experience, depending on where their level of consciousness is, what they can handle seeing as well. And so I think in one regard, yes, NDEs can certainly be seen as a gift because it expands your awareness. And life is never the same after you have an experience of an NDE, because you are now consciously aware that there is more to this life than the 3D dimension that we live in. But NDE can also be a curse, for those people who are non-believers, for those people who are not willing to grow and expand their consciousness, who want to stay in their comfort, zone of what they know, what they're familiar with. And they can go into a real crisis of identity, of meaning, of life, and go into really deep, I'll call it depression, because they're fighting what they've just experienced, what they've just seen, with the world that they've known all their lives. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that whilst NDEs can be seen as a gift, they can also be experienced as something quite painful until the ultimate surrender and acceptance that there is more. I've had 3 near-death experiences, and at the time of my first 2, which happened in very close succession, I was 24 years old. I was raised a Catholic. I'd never heard of NDEs or near-death experiences. This was back in 1991. And back then, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Google, we didn't have the capacity to hear about all these things unless you came across someone talking about it, which was very rare back then, or you found a book that happened to mention it. And it was a world that I had never even ventured into, nor was I particularly interested in, actually. So when it occurred for me, I remember waking up and thinking, did that really happen? Did I make it up? Because I had had so much morphine for pain. I'd just come out of surgery and wasn't in a very good way. And I didn't know how to make sense of it. And then when I was released from hospital, a girlfriend gave me a book, and it was You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, because I had been diagnosed with, malignant cancer, and I was given 6 months to live. So it was quite a significant pivot point in my life. I was super fit, super healthy, never drank, never smoked. Cancer was the last thing anyone, even the doctors, would have thought that this body would experience. And back then, Mira, in 1991, you barely heard the word cancer. If you heard it, it meant automatically death sentence. So there's a lot of fear and very limited beliefs around it at that time, and it was scary. But for me, I've always had a very inquisitive mind, and so I remember when the doctor said to me, Josie, I don't know how to tell you this, but it is cancer, it is malignant, it is stage 3. And we were talking, and then he said, and I said, well, what if I don't want to do anything? This is after the first surgery when they realised what had happened. I needed a second surgery very quickly. And he said, look, you've probably got 6 months to live. And he wrote that, like he actually put that in the report. And I saw it in writing, and something in me, it felt so surreal. It was almost like completely unbelievable. I could not really grasp the reality of what those words were suggesting, because there was a part of me that did not believe any of it, not for a second. And it was not a denial, it was a knowing. I think this was my entree from religion into spirituality, where I connected with a voice and a knowing inside of me that I didn't know I had until that moment. And this knowing said to me, you're going to be okay. And I just knew it. I knew it in the core of myself. I didn't know how, and this is where the journey begins, yeah? And so when I was reading this book, there was mention of near-death experiences and how people had described floating up at the ceiling and looking down at the body. And I'm like, I had that. That just happened to me last week, And so finally I didn't feel like a freak, and because I didn't want to tell my family and my friends about it in fear of being judged as a bit of a loony, or, that are you a drug affected, you're making it up. All of a sudden I'm reading these words in the book and I'm going, that's real, that did happen, and then it was like, so what does that mean? Who was that voice talking to me, and why did I come back? Why was I told to come back? And so that really was the birth of the seeker within me. And I was no longer satisfied with answers that had been given to me by, parents or teachers or ministers or anyone like that. All of a sudden, I needed to search for the answers for myself. And I started attuning to the wisdom of the body, because the body very quickly tells you if something feels right or not. The brain confuses you. The heart will let you know, and the body absolutely lets you know.
That deeply resonates with me.
So I had 2 NDEs one day apart back in 1991. And both times what occurred was that this body flatlined, so I literally died. And an aspect of my awareness lifted up and out of my body and was floating at the ceiling and looking down at my physical body. So I had full awareness that I was here, but I was also here. I was there and I was here. And it didn't confuse me. It was pure observation. There was no judgment. There was no panic. It was just observation, just witnessing this scene. And it was blissful. I was there just floating, going, just not even saying wow, it was like just observing. And it was very serene. It was very peaceful. And it was almost blissful, actually. And I'm just there floating, watching this body, watching the nurses freaking out, trying to revive the body. And then all of a sudden I heard this very big male voice come in and say, it's not your time yet. And then I was back in the body. And then the same thing happened the next day. The body flatlined, floated up here, watched myself, and this big voice again ordered me back into the body, So that was the first 2. And then the third near-death experience occurred for me in 2023, when I had been hospitalised for a very significant nervous system disorder. And the doctors were treating me with a new treatment plan using hospital supervised ketamine. And I'd done some research. I knew it was a heavy duty drug, but everything kind of suggested for this particular condition it's been very successful. So I went in there and I had it done. And I had 6 months pain free and it worked beautifully. 6 months later, the symptoms started reappearing. And so naturally, I had little resistance to accept the offer of the doctors to say, hey, let's repeat the process that we had before. It was very successful. And I said, yeah, sure. So I went in. And this time, the protocols in the hospital had changed because this is kind of the tail end of COVID and all of the changes that occurred in the hospital systems. And what I noticed was that the supervision of the administration was different and not as strict. And I was starting to complain after the second day of this very sharp pain in my liver area. And I called for the nurses. I said, please contact the doctor. I think this needs to be removed. And they said, it's Saturday. We're not going to disturb the doctor on a Saturday. And I said, well, you need to get a doctor here now because I'm not happy and I'm in a lot of pain. And they did that. A registered doctor came in and he said, you'll be right. Gave me Panadol. Didn't really take my complaints very seriously. And that night, my body went into toxic shock and I died. And this time, I was given an experience I could never, ever have imagined. So what happened was this body was totally unconscious, but an aspect of awareness started to witness this beautiful golden grid rising up and out of the body. And at the same time that this grid was coming out of the body, there was this white torus light field coming down from the right-hand corner of the room. And it was coming down to collect this golden grid from the body. So this was descending and this was ascending. And they were about to connect and I in this middle space said, wait, what's going on here? Am I dying? And all of a sudden, I realized this is exactly what was happening. You know, the soul was leaving the body and the light was coming to collect it, you know. And I interfered with that. And I said, wait, I haven't said goodbye yet. So an aspect of my awareness, fully awake in this other space, knew that the physical body was gone, that this other space was being suspended, and somehow an aspect of me was able to go interstate and find my father in the garden, go and find my mother in the kitchen, find my brother in his car, find my sister in her house, find my 2 children on the Gold Coast and say goodbye. And then I came back into this suspended scenario and I said, okay, I'm ready now.
And you were okay with that?
Totally.
You were at peace with it?
Totally. Did I want to go? No. No. But I had said goodbye, which was the most important thing at that time. You know, it really puts life and everything in perspective when you're right at death's door. You start to realize what's important. It's not the house, it's not the assets, it's not the money, it's not the jewelry, it's not the title, the job title, it's not the awards you've won in your life. It's none of that. It's the relationships that matter the most. That's it.
Yes. I was going to say that is so comforting to know, because sometimes, we are under the impression that the person that is dying is actually waiting for loved ones to come. So that is so lovely that you were able to go meet them where they were.
So one thing I can tell your listeners is this. The first time when I was diagnosed with cancer and I was in intensive care for 2 weeks. I was unconscious for most of that time. I was in and out of consciousness, but mostly unconscious. I heard every single conversation that occurred while I was unconscious. I could tell you where everyone was sitting. I could tell you what they were wearing. Everything. I heard it all, even though the body was unconscious. So if you're tending to a loved one in their final hours and they're unconscious and you're wondering, can they hear me? Do they know how much I love them? Talk to them, because they hear it all, right up to the moment they take their last breath. They hear it all. They might not be able to respond to you because the physical body may be, in a state that renders them unable to communicate that way. But let me rest your mind and assure you that they hear it all.
Thank you for those words, Josie.
So then really somehow, then there was this other voice that rose, right? And this other voice rose up and said, wait, not so fast. You're not the one that gets to decide when to tap out. It's me. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, this body has a voice and it's been trying to get my attention for the longest time, and I have ignored it. I've exhausted it. I've never allowed it to rest enough. I've kept pushing it beyond its capacity, and now it was saying, hey, you know what? It's me that decides, not you. And that's when I realized, metaphorically, I was falling on my knees, begging for forgiveness, begging for mercy, not realizing the significance of this physical form that we are birthed in. If we don't take care of this body, we can't realize the purpose that we were birthed to realize. We cannot express that life force that we are in our uniqueness and bring that forward as we promise to do for this life unless we look after the body that enables us to express ourselves. So, I've really came out of that whole experience with a profound reverence and respect and understanding of what this physical vessel really is. And so I take much better care of it now. I'm talking to the body all the time. I'm saying, what do you think? Does this feel right? And the body tells you straight away. We just got to learn the language of the body. It doesn't talk in words and mental. It talks in energy. And like Tesla and Einstein even told us that if you want to understand the universe, you have to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And everything we think, everything we say, everything we feel, everything we do has an energy, has a frequency, has a vibration that affects you as well as the world around you. So, it's definitely woken me up. It's definitely taught me a lot. And I realized that it happened to me so that I could share with others and teach others and remind others just how powerful they really are, who they really are, and what they're really capable of.
So I like that a lot. What other messages did you want to share with us? Unless you wanted to expand a little bit more on that reverence for the body temple that we have.
You are an expression of light. That's what we are, and we forgot. We were born into physical form, and we have to remember. That's what the journey's all about. It's a return to love. It's a return to that awareness of who we really are. And when we really connect with the truth of that, something lands inside you that creates this incredible, unshakable peace and resonance, that all of a sudden you can look out on the world and its beauty and appreciate it even more. That you can look out in the world and see the ugliness of what may be occurring and not be rattled by it, And by not reacting, what you're doing is you are amplifying the peace that the world needs during massive upheaval. And because we are energy, frequency, and vibration, just you being that way has an impact in the world around you, even though you don't realize that. Right? People say, well, who am I? I'm just one person. Yeah, right. Are you a drop of water in the ocean, or are you actually the ocean in a drop? And when you realize that, you've got so much more available to you. You can trust and tune into that. But the only way you're going to get there is solitude, stillness, and silence.
I love those words. Can you say it again? The three S's.
Yeah, solitude, stillness, and silence. And you'll find that the world is setting up in a way that we are totally distracted from doing any of that, unless we consciously carve out time and space to do that. You know, every day I'm out in nature, and I force myself to sit there some days, because I look at my list of things to do and I go, it's a crazy day, and I'm like, right, 1 hour outside. And that's my priority, because when I get that stillness and that silence and that quiet happening for me, the rest of the day just flows. It's like I just anchor in and connect into that profound stillness. And I always get a message. You know, after about half an hour of fighting mentally, you know, because you're sitting there and you're maybe resenting the fact that you're there and how boring it is or whatever, all of a sudden that just stops. And there's this quiet and there's this stillness. And then all of a sudden the magic happens. Something drops in and you start to like radiate from the inside out. And you take that with you into the rest of your day or night or whatever time it might be. And it's magic. It's truly magic.
I really love that. We were talking before and I mentioned that I'm an early riser. So I like to go on a walk, and it's under a canopy of trees that I just feel in communion with these trees. And I do that generally every morning. And sometimes when I don't feel like waking up early and I go, during the day when it's busy and people are around, I must say I prefer when it's just me or just a little few people walking around. And I do love doing that nature walk as well, and having that solitude and the stillness, and just seeing the morning wake up as I do.
Well, every morning I wake up to see the sunrise. As the sun is coming up, I always say thank you. You know, gratitude's just become part of my everyday experience, especially, yeah, definitely after that first near-death experience. You start to appreciate this gift that life really is. I don't take it for granted, not one day. So every morning the first thing I say is thank you, and every night the last thing I say is thank you. And I count my blessings, not my problems. Yeah.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, like I end the day with gratitude, and I realize that the more grateful I am, the more I realize I have already, that I am already. And so that really puts me into a better state to go into sleep. And in the mornings, if I I'll either sit outside in nature on the grass or I'll go for a walk. And I have a favourite tree, and I call her Mama Tree because she is the most magnificent, big, giant tree. And every time I see her, I talk to her. I go, hey, good morning. You know, and if people see me, I don't care. You know, they probably think I'm a nutter, and that's okay. And I'll go up to her and I'll give her a hug, and I'll put my forehead on her and I'll just hug this massive tree. And I've had a couple of people from time to time say, what are you doing? And I look at them and I go, hugging a tree. And I had one man one morning say, can I join you? I said, yeah, try it. He said, what do I do? I said, just hug, just be here, you know. And there we were, just sitting, just standing there, hugging this tree. It was just so beautiful. People can think whatever they want. It doesn't actually matter. It's really what happens for me when I connect with nature, it reminds me of my own inner nature, the stillness, the strength, the deep roots that are there, that keeps it upright, that keeps it solid, knowing what it is, and the expression is magnificently unique and beautiful. If only we would remember that about ourselves. And so it's just a nice reminder to connect in with that, but there's a lot more than that. There's the energetic exchange that goes on and the way that the nervous system can calibrate with all of that as well. So there's so many benefits to connecting with nature for the physical body as well.
I agree. Josie, can we talk about the voice? Because I thought that is just such a special story. If we could talk about the voice in your NDEs.
So the first time the voice had spoke to me, I didn't know who that voice was for a very long time. And it was in 2010 exactly, before I had the cranial surgery, that I went and saw a spiritual healer, and she was a trance channeler, and I didn't know what a trance channeler was back then, and it's someone that allows spirit to talk through their body. And the first voice that came through was the voice that spoke to me back in 1991, and I recognized it straight away. And as soon as I heard it, every hair in my body stood on end, and my heart was just exploding. It was just beautiful, like a big remembering and connection with something so loving. And the voice was Archangel Gabriel. And that voice has been with me every day since then.
So it has never left you.
It's never left me. I talk to Archangel Gabriel every day, and I know that Archangel Gabriel's with me every day. In fact, when I was a little girl, I would often make sure that I had a spare chair beside me, and it had to be empty because that's where my guardian angel would sit. And I would say these words as a child, this innocent child, right? Already knowing and connected to the archangels. Until one day, I remember I was on a tram and I had a spare seat beside me, and this was my archangel sitting beside me. And this lady said, went to sit down. I said, "Oh, you can't sit here, my angel's sitting here." And she said, "Don't be so stupid." And she just sat there. And I remember I just sank inside. I was like, and I felt sad, I felt wronged, I felt ashamed, and that maybe it was an illusion. This child all of a sudden was made to feel wrong and bad and ashamed. And somehow I abandoned that knowing and that connection. And then I just forgot, adolescence, teenage years. And then Archangel Gabriel came in at that moment of the out-of-body experience, reconnected. But I was not consciously aware of who that voice was until much later. And then once he identified himself to me, and we had a whole conversation going there, because I was about to go in for this really significant surgery. I didn't know if I was going to survive. And Archangel Gabriel said to me, "In 2 days' time, you'll be given a choice, but you must decide." And I didn't know what that meant. And I said, "What do you mean?" And went on to say, "In 2 days' time, you get to decide whether you return to my choir, because that's where you belong, or whether your work begins in earnest." And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't know which way I'm going to choose. But it was strangely reassuring to know that there was some kind of hierarchy or some kind of place beyond this dimension that I belonged. And that felt more like home than this. you know. So whichever way I chose was going to be okay. Although I did have the humanly attached scenario of two young children who were under my direct care that I didn't want to leave. So even I did have a desire to want to stay, but the physical body was very, very weak, and spiritually I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. So anyway, I had that surgery, and I remember when I was being wheeled into the operating room, there were these massive steel rods, drilled into my brain, into my head, and a big metal frame. And they do that so that the head doesn't move, when you're having brain surgery, head surgery. And I had the surgery. I was in recovery, and when I opened my eyes, I was aware, I'm alive, I'm awake, I've chosen, So that's when I became aware that I'd obviously made a decision. And it wasn't a conscious decision. It was obviously made under anesthetic, right? So when I went to see the neurosurgeon for my first appointment, when I was released from hospital, he said to me, "I'm curious about something, Josie." I said, "What's that?" And he said, "When we were putting you under anesthetic, you said something, and I want to know what it means." And I said, "What did I say?" Because I had no recollection at all. And he said, "Just as you went unconscious, you said, 'I've decided.'" And as soon as he said that, I went, I know exactly what that means, but I can't possibly explain it to him. So yeah, I thought that was really fascinating. You kind of have little seeds of wisdom that gets implanted somewhere, and it comes out when it's required, when it's needed, when you attune and align to it. And then all of a sudden it becomes a manifested reality, a creation.
That's beautiful. What was your initial reaction to being introduced to Archangel Gabriel?
I believe everyone has one, maybe even more than one, right? And that we can be in communion and communication with them every single day if we would only make the time to do so. And it takes discipline and it takes commitment.
So, what would you recommend to people who do want to communicate with their guardian angels? Do you have any advice?
I think the first thing you've got to be clear about is, what to make a genuine commitment. Say, yes, I really wish to do this. And then to ask yourself, what does commitment mean? What does it look like for me? If I was truly committed to something, how would I be showing up? Like before you even do any of the practices to connect, you got to get your commitment right. It's one thing to say, oh, it's a nice idea, versus, hey, I really, really want to do this. There's a massive difference. So you've got to get your commitment level in a space where it's grounded and it's solid and it's real, And then this is all preparation before you even start. So get your commitment level to a 10, not a 9, not a 9.5. What does a 10 look like for you if you're really committed to doing this? And then ask yourself, well, why do I want to do it? And get beyond the obvious answers, because if that was enough, you would have been doing it by now, right? So you've got to dig deep. You've got to dig deep and have at least 12 answers for that, right? And it's usually the last few that you've really got to dig for that are the real reasons why you ought to be, or want to be, need to be connecting with that higher realm, yeah? And so once you've got that set up, it's like, okay, so everyone's going to do it differently. Some people can do it in an active way. So I know when I'm dancing, I literally transcend this space, and I don't know where I go. I close my eyes, I dance, and I'm out, I'm away, Same when I'm drumming, like I can be drumming for hours and I will be away. I'm not here anymore, right? I'm dancing in the clouds with heaps of other people, and loving it, and it's blissful. And then I come back and it's like, okay, I'm back here again. Other people, my dad, I see him when he's fishing. He's in this really blissful state. And I know he's connecting with something bigger. You can see it, you can feel it. And he changes when he's there as well. He's at peace. Where is it in your life that you connect with something bigger than you? Whenever I'm in nature, I get that. I just stop. I really take it in and start to feel, not just see. I listen. I attune with the energy that's around me. And it's like, and your breathing changes. Everything expands and you become one with all of it. That's where it starts. And then the voices, that's later. Just start with energy for now. And as you start to really strengthen that connection, and you start to realize what feels good and right and what doesn't, and you start honoring that for yourself, then you can start going up and speaking to whoever you want to speak to, you can have conversation with.
Wow, that's profound. Um, so Josie, we were talking about before, what does it mean to have actually gone through the NDE?
I think when you do have an NDE, your life is forever changed. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now know. And this is where there's an invitation here to either deny it all and ignore it and brush it aside because it's too big, too hard to process, doesn't make any sense. And guess what? It doesn't. Not when you bring your rational three-dimensional mind to it. But when you open your curiosity and you start to open your mind and your willingness to understand more of life, then all of a sudden it just expands your awareness, your consciousness, because now you can't deny the presence of what's been revealed to you. And so integrating that into everyday life is the next step. It's like you can't walk out into life being the same person you were before because you're not that person anymore. Because you now know things that you didn't know before. You've now seen things that you never saw before. So even the way you walk the earth is completely different with that knowing, with that understanding, with that appreciation, always there. So I don't take anything for granted. I see life as an absolute blessing. It's not always pleasant, but when it's unpleasant, I realize that it's a call for love. It's a call for compassion. It's a call for softening, not judgment. What is it that I'm being invited to learn? How am I being invited to grow here? And it's a constant lesson in forgiveness.
Can we talk more about forgiveness? Because it is something that we all can relate to, either forgiving someone or having forgiveness extended to us as well.
Well, we're born in innocence, and that's our nature. And we will make mistakes. And guess what? That's how we get to learn and grow. Some of those mistakes will be much bigger than others, but so too are the lessons. And in a way, I believe we signed up for what we are experiencing. We only suffer as long as we resist the lesson. And you'll find that at the heart of most of those lessons is forgiveness. That there's some kind of ego interference that wants to be right. And when we want to be right, we surrender the capacity to be happy. And whatever you believe in, if it's God, source, energy, Allah, whatever you want to call it, that God of your heart will always look at his son, his daughters with love and say, wow, you could have done that a little bit differently, right? But won't punish, always extends forgiveness, always extends an opportunity for you to learn, for you to grow, for you to remember. that it's all love or a cry for love.
I like your reminders about our true essence. It seems like we pass through that waterfall of forgetting just to relearn it all over again.
Yes, and when you do, then the peace begins. But it's a peace that's pure and it's profound. People will feel it when they're in your presence because you're at peace within yourself. You're not at war within yourself anymore. The battle's over. And then that is what you bring out into the world. That becomes your legacy.
Josie, what advice would you have for someone who is at the edge of death or taking care of someone who is, at that edge as well?
They're very different scenarios. I would say for the person who is at the edge of death themselves is to make peace with every aspect of your life. If there is something unresolved, resolve it. Make peace with it, forgive, offer love, and just resolve it, so that you can leave with peace in your heart. Yeah? And even if you don't want to have the conversations, write it down, release it, let it go. And for someone who's caring for someone who may be leaving, just love them. Just love them. You don't have to say anything. It's all energy. Words almost are too much. It's hard to talk when you're there. But they'll feel it. They'll feel the resonance of your love and your care. And just be there. Just touch them. Don't avoid touching them. I remember when I was diagnosed with cancer the first time, people stopped wanting to hug me or touch me because somehow they thought if I touch her I might catch it. It was very, scary back in 1991. They didn't really understand cancer the way they do today. And so it was frightening for them, but it was also frightening for me because they were changing the way they behaved around me. And I also started to become very sensitive to fear. I could feel people's fear, and that made me feel worse. And that's why I really needed to move away from all of my family and all of my friends so that I could just be by myself and heal. And that's what I did. Something in me said, right, you need to leave, you need to go and sit in the sun every day, and you need to get well. And I did. I defied the odds, and I trusted my body. I tuned into the wisdom of my body that was telling me what I needed to do. I didn't always accept medical help. Sometimes I did, but most of the times I didn't need to. My body told me I didn't need to. And I'm still here. And then since then I've studied masters in neuroscience, and that's given me a greater appreciation to know how the mechanics inside the body works, especially inside the brain. And that's really helped me a lot because when I had the cranial surgery, I couldn't walk or talk properly for 6 months. And I was told that I may not ever be able to walk or talk properly again. And it took me 6 months to retrain, and I did it. Only because I'd learnt all about neuroplasticity and the presence of something called imaginal cells. When you rehearse things in your mind over and over to the nth degree, the same neural pathway fires up as if you are performing those tasks. So I knew all the theory, and now I got to put it into practice. And I think, I look at my life, I look at all the adversity and the challenges that I've faced, and I'm like, at some level, okay, I signed up for this. I don't know why. I would have said yes to so many things, but I did. And I knew then that just like the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, you are to come back to your communities and share what you've learned for the benefit of the whole. And that's what it's all about. It's not just for me. It's to bring a message of true hope to the world that we can transcend things if we align fully with surrender and with trust to the knowing of who we really are, and then we remember what we're really capable of.
I love that. What other messages do you hope people get from listening to your NDE, or just from your experience, what you went through?
I think the most profound thing I would like people to know is that, in life, pain is inevitable. That's how we get to learn and grow. But suffering is optional. We do that to ourselves. Yeah? Growth is intentional. You need to choose it.
Josie, it's been a pleasure. I have three questions for you. What brings you joy and laughter these days?
Uh, Sunshine and babies.
Aw. um, what would you say to young Josie who is about to embark on the greatest adventures of her life?
Hold on to your seat, sweetheart. You're going to be okay.
Yes. And what final message do you have for people listening? Final blessing or message?
I would say love is always the answer.
Thank you so much for being with us here today.